That's President William Ruto. You were speaking on Monday during the celebrations of 12 years of the Supreme Court. Now in studio I have very important persons who have actually been involved, either in formation, that is the establishment, but also service to the courts and the Supreme Court itself. Gladys Boss was the first Chief Registrar of the Judiciary. Nancy Baraza was the first Deputy Chief Justice, and of course a member of the bench of the Supreme Court, also Deputy President of the Supreme Court. And Nelson Harvey has appeared before the various courts of the judiciary. Help us, starting with you, former DCJ, your assessment of the journey that we have walked as a country, and especially what the framers of the Constitution intended the Supreme Court to be versus what it is now at 12 years.
Kenyans wanted a Supreme Court as a court of final decision on matters legal, and they had not been satisfied with the structure of the courts before the establishment of the Supreme Court, and they felt that they needed court of that level to be the final arbiter on matters legal. And so it came by very, very strong demand by the public. And I would say it is a good court. It has been making decisions. It has walked a journey, has made very, very profound decisions. It has set jurisprudence. And I would say it's doing its work. Right. That's what I would say.
It's doing its work.
Yeah.
Nelson Harvey, do you associate yourself with those views? What are you witnessing, especially 12 years of 3 arms of government, which obviously you've seen a bit of interaction. What do you make of it?
Well, in addition to what the DCJ has said, there's one fundamental issue that we need to demarcate. The intention of the Supreme Court was primarily to consider an election petition insofar as the president is concerned, because the people had lost faith in the High Court. The people had lost faith in the Court of Appeal. As an adjunct to that, the Supreme Court was given a secondary mandate of considering in very special circumstances constitutional issues that were so important that they ought not to have been left at the determination of the Court of Appeal. To what extent has the Supreme Court fared on? I think the curve has oscillated up and is now going down. Unfortunately, that is the case.
Okay, we'll get to the details of what that means of the curve going down. Deputy Speaker, now for you, because you were there at the establishment, I believe, when you were appointed the Chief Registrar of the Judiciary, what do you make of what we see now? You've seen decisions across the superior courts. So the High Court will take a position, Court of Appeal disagrees with that, Supreme Court sometimes will agree, sometimes will disagree with that. What does that tell us in these 12 years of the Supreme Court?
I think when Kenyans clamored for a Supreme Court in the over 20 years of the constitution-making process, and as you know, the request for a Supreme Court by Kenyans was one of the non-contentious issues during the constitution-making process. Because we had reached a stage in our judicial processes that it was felt like you start from the Magistrates Court, automatically go to the High Court, then automatically take it to the Court of Appeal. And at the Court of Appeal was bogged with all manner of cases. Every other type and subject matter of cases could be taken to the Court of Appeal. The coming up of the Supreme Court was to make sure that not all cases actually can be appealed to the Supreme Court. It's only very fine matters. You must get permission to take a matter before the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court was able to operate as a court with less workload and with less clutter, and to allow them, they were supposed to be the thinkers. They were supposed to be the compass for jurisprudence direction in the country. That's why they have limited cases. In fact, Supreme Court judges are supposed to spend most of their time reading.
Right.
And you know, interacting with other members of Supreme Courts and having colloquiums in order to enrich their thinking. Supreme Court judges are supposed to be looking at what's happening in the lower courts and thinking, is there a direction? So that even when I don't have a matter that I'm appealing against, I can go to the Supreme Court for an advisory opinion.
Right.
And if you remember, some of the first ones was an advisory opinion on the two-thirds gender principle, which, Dr. Nancy Baraza was part of. At that time, there was also the case between the National Assembly and the Senate. So it was the first time that we just went and asked for direction.
Right.
Without having a active contentious matter before it. And also, if you remember, when the Supreme Court came into office, I think, they were created in the 2010 Constitution, but it took almost a year or more. More than almost a year before you could take office, because there was a court case barring the swearing in of the Supreme Court because you did not meet the two-thirds gender rule. And I can say I had the pleasure of swearing in the first Supreme Court.
And they also didn't have sitting space.
And they didn't have sitting space.
Yes.
And I was part of getting you the chairs.
Absolutely.
Quite some work for us to walk through here. You're saying that the judges are supposed to be thinkers. They're supposed to spend time reading. We'll be assessing whether that has been the case 12 years later. But we're taking a short break here on tonight. When we come back, we'll have more stories, but also remember, like I told you, the special edition of News Gang. This is the bench that will be walking us through that, and also all the other questions that you may have, which you can also start by writing to us on X. It's at Citizen TV Kenya at Sam Gichuku. The hashtag to use is Citizen News Gang. We'll be sure to get some of them for you.